most people discover Il Volo and spend the next 3 hours crying. Not because the music is sad, because it's the most beautiful thing they've ever heard. This is the story nobody tells you about Il Volo, and once you hear it, you'll never listen to them the same way again. Before we get into their story, this channel is dedicated entirely to Il Volo. The music, the history, the emotion, and every cry. Hit like if you're already a fan, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Let's talk about where this all began. There is a country in southern Europe that is roughly the size of Arizona, and yet, that one country gave the world the Roman alphabet, modern law, the piano, opera, the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, pizza, pasta, espresso, Gucci, Ferrari. How does that happen? How does one country, one peninsula, shape so much of the world we live in today? That is what we are going to find out together. Welcome to Il Volo Fan Space, and today we are going on a journey through 3,000 years of Italian history, culture, food, music, and the two extraordinary cities that help shape two of our favorite voices in all of music. So get comfortable, because this one is going to be good. But over the next few centuries, something remarkable happened. Rome started winning. It won wars against its neighbors. It absorbed their land. It absorbed their people. It built roads, straight, flat, remarkable roads that connected the entire Italian peninsula. And then it kept going. By 509 BC, the Romans had gotten rid of their kings and built something new, a republic. Elected officials, a senate, a system of laws. It was one of the earliest experiments in organized government in human history. And then, by 27 BC, a man named Augustus Caesar became the first Roman emperor. And at its peak, the Roman Empire controlled 5 million square kilometers of land, from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south, from Spain in the west to the borders of modern Iran in the east. But here is the thing that really matters. It is not the size of the empire that changed the world. It is what the Romans built inside it. They built roads that connected every corner of Europe. Roads so well constructed that some of them still exist today. They built aqueducts that brought clean running water into cities at a time when most of the world had none. They developed concrete, the arch, underfloor heating, public libraries, a postal system, and most importantly, they built a system of law, a set of principles about justice, about rights, about how people should be treated, that became the foundation of legal systems across Europe and the Americas, right up to this moment. When Rome fell in 476 AD, the empire was gone, but everything Rome had built, that was not going anywhere. Now, while all of this was happening, while Rome was building its empire, a new religion was quietly spreading through the Mediterranean world, Christianity. It began in the Middle East, but it traveled fast, along Roman roads, through Roman trading ports, into Roman cities. And at first, the Roman emperors were not fans. Christians were persecuted. They were seen as a threat. But then, in 313 AD, something changed. An emperor named Constantine legalized Christianity throughout the empire, and Rome, the city that had once persecuted Christians, became the center of the Christian world. As the Roman Empire slowly collapsed over the following centuries, the Catholic Church stepped into that space. The Pope, the Bishop of Rome, became one of the most powerful figures in all of Europe. Kings needed his blessing. Wars were fought in his name. And today, Vatican City, a tiny independent state right in the middle of Rome, is home to over 1 billion Catholics worldwide. A faith that began in a small corner of the Middle East and found its home in Italy. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of influence that shapes the history of the entire planet. So after Rome fell, what happened to Italy? Well, it broke apart into dozens of independent city-states, each one fiercely proud, deeply competitive, and absolutely convinced that their city was the greatest place on earth. You had Venice, built on over 100 small islands in the middle of a lagoon, with no roads, just canals. Venice became the greatest trading port in the Mediterranean. Its merchants sailed everywhere. Its wealth was extraordinary. You had Florence, controlled by a banking family called the Medici, who were so wealthy, so powerful, and so passionate about art and beauty that they essentially funded an entire revolution in human culture. We will get to that in a moment. You had Milan, a city of industry, of armor making, of trade, and Genoa, a seafaring republic whose sailors were so skilled at navigation that one of them, a man named Christopher Columbus, ended up changing the map of the entire world. Now, these city-states fought with each other constantly. They were rivals. They competed for trade, for territory, for prestige. But here is the thing about competition. It pushes people to do extraordinary things. Every great family wanted the most beautiful cathedral, the most impressive palace, the greatest painters, the finest musicians. And that desperate desire to be the best, to outshine every other city, created the conditions for something the world had never seen before: the Renaissance. The word comes from French. It means rebirth. And that is exactly what it was. Starting in Florence in the 14th century and spreading across Europe over the next 300 years, the Renaissance was a complete transformation of how human beings thought about themselves and about the world. Artists, scientists, architects, philosophers, they all started asking a new question. Not just, what does God want, but what is a human being capable of? And the answers they came up with were extraordinary. There was Leonardo da Vinci, a man who was so curious about everything that he could not choose between being a painter, a scientist, an engineer, an architect, or an anatomist. So he became all of them. He painted the Mona Lisa, he painted the Last Supper, and in his notebooks, he sketched designs for flying machines, solar power, and a primitive robot. 500 years before any of those things were invented, there was Michelangelo, who at the age of 26 sculpted the statue of David from a single block of marble that other sculptors had given up on, and who then spent 4 years lying on his back on a platform near the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, painting one of the most celebrated works of art in human history. There was Galileo Galilei, born in Pisa, who looked through a telescope at the night sky and proved at great personal gravitational wrist that the Earth moves around the sun and not the other way around. His approach to observation and evidence became the foundation of the scientific method. Every scientist working in any field today is building on what Galileo started. There was Dante Alighieri, who wrote a poem called The Divine Comedy, a journey through heaven, hell, and everything in between, that is widely considered one of the greatest works of literature ever written. And in writing it, he helped shape the Italian language itself. Think about what all of these people had in common. They were all Italian. They were all working within a few hundred kilometers of each other, and they were all alive within roughly the same century. That happens when a society decides that beauty, knowledge, and human potential are worth investing in. The Renaissance was not just a collection of great individuals. It was a culture that made greatness possible, and that culture was Italian. Now let's talk about something a little more delicious. Italian culture is not just what happened in the past. It is alive right now, in the food people eat, the music they listen to, the clothes they wear, and it has been exported to every corner of the world. Let's start with food, because honestly, if Italy had given the world nothing else, the food alone might have been enough. Italy is not one cuisine. It is 20 regional cuisines. Each region has its own dishes, its own ingredients, its own fierce pride, and they will argue about it, passionately, at dinner. Naples gave us pizza, real pizza, thin, wood-fired, simple, perfect. Bologna gave us ragu, what the rest of the world calls bolognese sauce, as well as tortellini and mortadella. Sicily gave us arancini, cannoli, and one of the finest food cultures in the entire Mediterranean. Parma gave us Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, and the prosciutto di Parma that the whole world puts on charcuterie boards and calls fancy. But here is what matters about Italian food. It is not just eating. For Italians, a meal is a social event. It is a reason to sit down together, to slow down, to talk. Food is how Italy says, I love you, and the whole world has been saying thank you ever since. Then there is music, specifically opera. Italy invented opera. Right there in Florence, around the year 1600, a group of musicians and poets decided to try something new, combining drama, poetry, and music into one complete art form. They called it opera, which simply means work in Italian. And what started as an experiment in a Florentine salon became the dominant art form in Western music for the next 300 years. Composers like Verdi, Puccini, Rossini, and Vivaldi became the most celebrated musicians in the world. Milan's La Scala Opera House, which opened in 1778, is still considered one of the most prestigious stages a singer can stand on. This is the tradition that flows directly through Il Volo every single time they perform. When Piero, Ignazio, and Gianluca sing Nessun Dorma or Grande Amore, they are standing in a line that goes back 400 years of Italian musical genius. That is the weight they carry, and they carry it beautifully. And fashion, Milan, the fashion capital of the world, or at the very least, one of the top 2 or 3. Gucci, Prada, Versace, Armani, Fendi, Valentino, all Italian, all born from a culture that believes deeply and sincerely that how something looks matters, that beauty is not vanity, it is a form of respect for yourself and for the people around you. That philosophy, that beauty has value, is perhaps the most Italian idea of all, and it runs through everything, from the architecture, to the food, to the music, to the clothes. Now let us get personal, because part of what makes Il Volo so special, to me, and I think to many of you, is knowing where they come from. These are not just voices. These are people shaped by real places, real histories, real landscapes. So let's go to Sicily, to a small hilltop town called Naro, the place that raised Piero Barone. Naro sits about 400 meters above sea level in south-central Sicily, in the province of Agrigento. It is not a big town, about 7,000 people, narrow cobblestone streets, buildings made of golden limestone that glow warm in the afternoon sun. And from the higher parts of the town, you can look out over the rolling hills of the Sicilian countryside for what feels like forever. The town is ancient, and I mean genuinely ancient. Settlements here go back to the ancient Greeks and to the Arabs who ruled much of Sicily during the medieval period. In fact, the name Naro most likely comes from the Arabic word nar, which means fire. Think about that. A town named Fire. That is quite a thing to grow up in. The architecture of Naro is stunning in the way that only old Sicilian towns can be. The most dramatic building is the Chiaramonte Castle, a 14th century fortress built by one of Sicily's most powerful noble families. It still stands at the top of the town, looking out over the landscape like it has been there forever, which, honestly, it nearly has. And then there are the churches. Naro has over 20 churches for a town of 7,000 people. 20. That tells you everything you need to know about the depth of faith in this community. Every street seems to have one. Every family has a saint they pray to. The patron saint of Naro is San Calogero, believed to have been an African monk who came to Sicily in the 6th century and performed miracles among the poor. His feast day is one of the biggest celebrations of the year. The whole town comes alive for it. And the landscape around Naro, the Sicilian countryside, is one of the most beautiful things I can describe to you. Rolling golden hills, ancient olive trees, and in February, when the almond trees bloom, the hillsides turn white and pink, like snow that smells like flowers. That is where Piero Barone grew up, in a place of ancient stone, deep faith, and extraordinary natural beauty. And you hear it. You hear it in the warmth of his voice. You hear Naro in Piero every time he sings. Now, let us travel north from the quiet hilltops of Sicily to the busy, beautiful ancient city of Bologna, the place where Ignazio Boschetto was born and raised. Bologna is the capital of the Emilia-Romagna region in northern Italy. And if Naro is intimate and contemplative, Bologna is alive. It hums, it moves, it feeds you and teaches you and surprises you around every corner. Bologna has 3 nicknames, and all 3 of them are true. The first is La Dotta, the learned, because Bologna is home to the oldest university in the entire Western world. The University of Bologna was founded in 1088. That is nearly 1,000 years ago. Dante studied here. Petrarch studied here. Copernicus, the man who proved the Earth goes around the sun, studied here. Today it has over 80,000 students, and the city has an energy that only university towns have. Young, curious, always in conversation. The second nickname is La Grassa, the fat, not as an insult, as the highest possible compliment, because many Italians, and Italians are serious about this topic, consider Bologna the greatest food city in the entire country, the birthplace of tagliatelle al ragu, of tortellini, of mortadella, of lasagna, as it is actually supposed to be made. There is a market district in the city centre called the Quadrilatero that has been feeding people since the Middle Ages. Walk through it and you will understand immediately why this city earned that nickname. And the third nickname is La Rossa, the red, for the terracotta red rooftops that cover the city like a warm blanket, glowing orange and gold in the late afternoon light. From a high point, the whole city looks like it is made of sunset. But the most distinctive thing about Bologna, the thing that makes it unlike anywhere else in the world, is the porticos. 40 kilometers of covered arcades lining the streets of the city. They were built starting in the Middle Ages so that students and merchants could walk through the city sheltered from rain and summer heat. You could walk for hours and never get wet. In 2021, UNESCO declared Bologna's porticos a World Heritage Site, and walking under them today, those ancient stone columns, the light falling through in patterns, the sound of the city echoing around you, it feels like walking through time. And this is where Ignazio Boschetto grew up, under those porticos, in a city that has been feeding great minds and great voices for nearly 1,000 years. A city with music in its blood. Composer Ottorino Respighi was born here, and Bologna has always been a home for opera and classical performance. You hear Bologna in Ignazio too, that warmth, that richness, that sense that there is always more flavor, more depth, more life, just around the next corner. So, Italy, a country the size of Arizona, and yet the Roman alphabet, used by billions of people every single day, the foundation of modern law, the scientific method, the Renaissance, opera, modern banking, invented by Florentine merchants in the 13th century, the piano, the violin, pizza, pasta, espresso, high fashion, some of the most celebrated art ever created by human hands, all from one peninsula, all from one culture, all from a people who believed for thousands of years that beauty and excellence were worth pursuing with everything you had. And then in 2009, 3 boys from 3 very different Italian towns were brought together on a television stage. A boy from a hilltop town in Sicily, a boy from beneath the porticos of Bologna, a boy from the mountains of Abruzzo. 3 different Italies, 3 different landscapes, 3 different stories. One sound. When Il Volo stand on a stage and sing, when Piero's voice fills a concert hall, when Ignazio reaches for a note and finds it like it was always waiting for him, they are not just singing, they are carrying every inch of this history in their voices. The ancient stone of Naro, the porticos of Bologna, the art of the Renaissance, the passion of Italian opera, the warmth of a country that has for 3,000 years believed that beauty is one of the most important things in the world, and now they share it with all of us. I hope this gave you a little more of the world behind the music, because understanding where something comes from makes you love it even more. Thank you so much for watching. If this video meant something to you, please share it with another Il Volo fan. Leave a comment below. I would love to know which part of Italy captured your heart the most.